Hello, welcome to season 4, episode 2 of Uncanny Oddities. Tonight we're talking about building a planet, and we already have our good friend James in the chat tonight, old 8 Gauge over here. Thank you for coming to hang out with us tonight. So, tonight we have a fairly interesting topic. So, yesterday we were talking about hyperdrives and warp drives and traveling between planets. So, tonight I thought it would be fun to talk about building a planet. Everyone's played Minecraft. That's kind of like building a planet, right? So I got curious and I was like, I did a little research. I was like, you know, what exactly scientifically constitutes a planet? Like what is scientifically needed to be for something to be considered a planet? And yes, I was thinking about Pluto. Poor guy. Too small, I suppose. So, for an object to be scientifically classified as a planet, it generally must meet three primary criteria established by the International Astronomical Union, if I can get the words out, or the IAU in 2006. These criteria are orbital characteristics, the object must orbit the sun or a star for exoplanets. Two, it needs to have sufficient mass. The object must have enough mass for its self gravity to overcome rigid body forces, leading it to assume a nearly round shape. This characteristic means it reaches hydrostatic equilibrium. Clearing the neighborhood. Now, this one sounds like, you know, like you're preparing for something, right? Something big or serious. This just means that the object must have cleared its orbit of other debris, like, asteroids and trash and just, general stuff like that. This means it is gravitationally dominant in its orbital zone and removes other objects of similar size except for its own satellites. So basically, if we wanted to make our own planet, we would need to make sure that we meet all of these criteria, which, with the right technology, should be simple enough, right? We've had, science fiction could easily make this types of technology. So there's a few other things to consider, such as dwarf planets, which is where Pluto is located at these days. So basically, objects like Pluto are categorized as dwarf planets because they meet the first two criteria but do not clear their orbital neighborhoods. So that's why Pluto is not considered a planet anymore. It's just the gravity isn't strong enough. It doesn't have a good enough orbital field. So there are a variety of planet types, such as terrestrial planets, rocky planets, like which include rocky planets like Earth and Mars. That's where we're at, and where we're from, according to some people. So then we have gas giants, Jupiter and Saturn, which are predominantly composed of gases. And then we have ice giants, like Uranus and Neptune, which have significant amounts of water, ammonia, and methane ices. And I was watching a clip on YouTube earlier just to add another pop culture reference. If you have seen the movie Interstellar and they go to that water planet where, like, so much of the planet is water and everything, and everyone's like, oh, that's not real. Well, apparently there is a planet out there like that. I think it was called KB 18. But yeah, apparently there really is a planet out there that's just like all water, like even more so than Earth. And people were making jokes in the comments about Leviathan being there. So definitely something interesting to, just keep in mind. You know, yes, I know, James. I know, old gas giant. Uranus is a gas giant. Let's go ahead. We said it, okay? We said it. Just for you, James. Just for you. And then, so Pluto, as we all know, who, those of us who are a little bit older, I suppose, maybe not some of the younger generation, but as I am aware, and my generation, Pluto used to be considered a planet when I was a kid because we used to have to make, like, solar system display models and stuff like that, and we always had to memorize all the planets like Earth, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Pluto, all that stuff. But Eventually, after I graduated, a little bit later on in life, Pluto was reclassified as a from a full planet to a dwarf planet, and me and a bunch of other science geeks were very disappointed, and we still to this day have very upset feelings about Pluto no longer being a planet. It's like, look, come on. You can't just give something the status of planet and then take it away later. That's not fair. You know, you can't just change your mind. I mean, what if someone said Earth wasn't a planet? I mean, wouldn't you want your status back as a planet? Come on now. What about the Plutonians? The Plutonian lives matter, guys. Come on. So it was primarily due to the adoption of the specific criteria by the IAU in 2006, which we spoke of briefly a minute ago. So the main reasons for the reclassifications was that it was unable to clear its orbit. One of the key criteria for being classified as a planet is the ability to, quote unquote, clear the neighborhood around its orbit. Pluto shares its orbital zone with other objects in the Kuiper belt, which means it does not dominate its orbital area. It does not clear its orbit. Basically, the gravity is too weak. Now, there was also the discovery of similar objects, such as Eris, which is a trans-Neptunian object similar in size to Pluto, raised questions about what should be considered a planet. Eris is more passive than Pluto, prompting astronomers to reconsider Pluto's status. So basically, they just took away Pluto's status as a planet because they're like, there's another, thing out there that it's like an asteroid, but the asteroid is the size of your planet. So yeah, you're not really a planet anymore. You're just like you're an asteroid now, pretty much. It is what they did. Yes, thank you, Haley Hills. Justice for Pluto. Thank you. Now, there was also the requirement for definitional clarity when the IAU aimed to create clear definitions to avoid ambiguity. Defining what constitutes a planet led to the exclusion of Pluto as it did not meet all the revised criteria, unfortunately. Which I still say is not fair. Not fair to Pluto. Plutonian lives matter, right? So, the historical context is that it was originally classified as the ninth planet after its discovery in 1930. That's, when I was in school, we had to classify it as the ninth planet in models of our solar system. So, basically, what they taught me in school when I was a kid is already outdated with new science. Man, I'm old. But as more objects were discovered in the outer solar system, they decided that the definition needed refinement, so to say. So now we're getting into the interesting part. Now, the interesting part about this is the lunar classification of the moon. Is the moon considered a planet? Well, unfortunately, no. The moon is not considered a planet because it orbits the Earth, making it a natural satellite than an independent celestial body. Natural satellite. Interesting wording there. So, for an object to be classified as a planet, it must orbit a star like the sun. Well, it orbits Earth, doesn't it? Is that not close enough? Clearing the neighborhood. While the moon participates in Earth's gravitational system, it does not clear its own orbital neighborhood, which is a requirement for something to be classified as a planet. Now, the moon is also significantly smaller than planets. Its mass and size do not provide the necessary gravitational influence to be classified separately. Now, I've always felt a very strong connection to the moon. So, you know what? I'm going to put the moon in the same category as Pluto. Poor moon. Good night, moon. That book was not about a planet. I guess it's just considered a star. But in a way, every star is its own small planet, is it not? So then I got to thinking, and I went down my rabbit hole. You know how I do. So the moon, there's a big conspiracy theory out there. Now, before I go any further, just, for the sake of the reputation of the show, this is my own personal theory. And disclaimer, this does not represent the show as a whole. This is my theory as the personal host for tonight. I am very strongly convinced that the moon is fake. Like, it's really up there. There's something up there. But I do not believe that the moon is what we're told that it is. I'll be vague and leave it at that for now. So, the biggest conspiracies around the moon is some people believe, myself included, that the moon is hollow because when they sent up the rocket, they sent up one of the rockets for the Apollo project when they were doing all that, and one of the rockets hit the moon and it made a gong, gong sound, which is a sound that typically resonates during hollow hitting, like a bell or something like that. And that's a very good question, James. Why can you see parts of the moon in daylight? I can't see any other stars in the daylight. Maybe, like, every once in a while, maybe people say you can see, like, Jupiter, I think, in the daylight, or Venus. Why can you see those in the daylight? Why can we see anything in the daylight? But the sun is bright. Yes, exactly. But that's exactly the point. Because the sun is so bright, shouldn't the sun block out all the other lights in the sky? The only reason we can see stars at night, well, if we can see stars at night, there's a lot of light pollution out there. See, light pollution. If the sky is too bright, we can't see the stars. So theoretically, if the moon was a naturally occurring celestial body, theoretically we shouldn't be able to see it during the daytime. I don't think. That doesn't, I don't understand that. But if anyone out there knows better, please, we're open to challenging. We're open to challenges. Now, another one that is very popular, and this is one of James's favorites, and I'm a believer as well now. I looked into it, and I'm also a believer. Although, for full clarification, Rob and Spider are definitely not believers. This is only me. Just me and James on this one. But there is a widely circulated theory that says that the Apollo moon landing missions were staged by NASA and the US government. Proponents argue that photographs and videos from the missions were fabricated on Earth in a studio in Burbank, California, with help from Steven Spielberg, citing perceived anomalies like shadows, which should not exist in certain areas, flag behavior, which, why is the flag billowing in the breeze if there's not supposed to be a breeze on the moon? And the absence of stars in the background, because why can you not see the stars in the background? Like, you should be surrounded by stars all over the place. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't, work very well. Oh, you're fine, Haley. Thank you for coming to hang out with us. But there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't work very well with the moon being a naturally occurring celestial body. Another one that I really like is about the moon rocks, because as you dig deeper into Earth, while you're here on Earth, as you dig deeper into Earth, the rocks get older as you get closer to the center of the Earth, right? Because that's just how things work around here. That's how we assume that things should work on all planets, in theory, in theory, of course. But the moon, when you go to the moon, it's backwards. The oldest rocks are on the surface of the moon, which, research shows that the only time you have old rocks on the surface is when you've been drilling or digging for an extended period of time. And that doesn't really make much sense. And some people say that there are alien bases on the moon. including Robert McMonigal, I believe is his name. He was a very famous remote viewer who did some remote viewing stuff for NASA and the CIA. And he was told to remote view the moon. And when he did, when he was remote viewing the moon, he found alien bases where humans were working with gray aliens together. If you believe his claims, that's what he said. He said that he found alien bases where humans and aliens were working together. And when he got close to the aliens, even though he was in his astral projection, like remote viewing, and his consciousness was the only thing that was up there, the aliens could sense his consciousness separated from his body. So, of course, he got scared and he went back to Earth. He was like, no, this is not cool. James says there was a guy taken to the moon by moon men in 1888. He brought back moon potatoes that appeared to be terrestrial rocks, and it didn't cost taxpayers a cent. Okay, that's pretty interesting. I hadn't heard about that one yet. I wonder if they'll put that one in the UFO files. These UFO files are pretty interesting, I gotta say. Project Bluebeam, way more entertaining than I expected it to be. I knew it was gonna be wild, but I was not expecting cat women and and political threats from thousands of light years away. But hey, I'm here for it. I was definitely here for it. Another theory says that ancient non-human civilizations once inhabited the moon. Supporters argue that certain lunar figures resemble artificial structures or images of ancient beings, like I think Valles Marineris is on Mars, but they have something very similar to that on the moon as well. There was like a statue or a rock surface that looked like a human face, and they just said that it was a pareidolia. They just said it was pareidolia. That was all. And James, I'm already there. I was watching a thing earlier that was talking about the timeline divergence and how the elites are lizard people that are taking over society because they're actually the fallen angels and the Nephilim. And it turns out that they are the ones who have been keeping everything hidden because as soon as we find out their secret, we get to tell everyone else, and then, their power is done for. But, just crazy stuff. Don't pay that any attention, obviously. But my favorite theory of all about the moon, my favorite one of all, the moon is used as a monitoring outpost for Earth, suggesting that extraterrestrial life uses it to observe human activities. And that's only half of the theory. I'm going to take it even deeper. The other half of the observation station is yes, we do the conspiracy theory. We do believe that the moon is an observation station or a satellite, a man-made or alien-made, however you want to think about it, since aliens are just humans from 48,000 to 52,000 years in the future. But whatever. But it's a satellite that was created, and we also believe that it orbits the Earth so they can watch us and pay attention to us, and they monitor human consciousness with the moon. And when people die, when the body, the vessel that we are in right now, called the body, when this deteriorates through cellular entropy, which is what time is actually what we perceive to be as time, is just the effects of gravity causing cellular entropy as we hurtle through space. Time travel and space travel are one and the same. To travel through time is to travel through space. And it is the effects of gravity and cellular entropy that break down the vessel, which we call a body. But once we escape from the vessel of the body, we believe that the soul goes back up into the moon, and then the moon is like a processing plant. And if you go into the light, then you go back to the moon, and the light is the light from when you're being born into the new world, into your new life. And that's why babies cry when they are born, because they are just realizing that they are about to lose all their memories in just a few seconds, and they've just been born into a new life, and they have to go through this whole simulation all over again. And just to clarify, these are my personal opinions. They do not represent the show as a whole. These are my personal opinions. Disclaimer. But the thing with the moon is it's a soul recycler, and if you get trapped in the moon and you go into the light, that's when you get born into the new body. But if you can manage to remember this and you can stay away from the light and turn around and go the opposite direction away from the light after you exit this vessel, if you can remember to go in the opposite direction of the light, you can gain true freedom and you can go to the next dimension and you can ascend, but only if you have the consciousness which is high enough to remember that. And that is what we believe about the moon, is that we believe the moon is a soul trap, which basically conditions you, puts a lot of guilt into your soul and tries to convince you to come back and try to make the world a better place and try to atone for all your sins and all your crime and all your guilt. And that's why the ancient Egyptians had the belief about weighing your heart against a feather, is because it was symbolic of the moon soul trap, where they try to condition you to believe that you're guilty. And if you feel enough guilt, it weighs down your soul. And that's why they do the scales, because it's about the weight. And it's not about whether you committed crimes or not. It's not about whether or not you committed crimes at all. It is 100% about your own guilt. So if you can commit crimes and feel no guilt about it, you can still escape. But if you commit 0 crimes and feel guilt, you will still be trapped. And that's how that works. But it's just a very intriguing theory to me. Whether it's true or not, it's still very good entertainment and still very interesting to think about. Just like, a lot of these scientists that went missing were trying to tell us about they were trying to warn us about the timeline divergence in 2030 and how we have to raise human consciousness and awareness, because it's the only way that we can get into the timeline of true freedom and escape the timeline of, let's just say, the timeline of Cyberpunk 2077. It's a timeline controlled by corporate greed and control. And, so the main concept for tonight was, and there is a reason that I brought up the moon, is because we were talking about, do we believe that it's possible to build a planet? And I believe that with all the technology that we've had between things like Star Wars, Star Trek, Star Trek, I'm not sure. I never really watched it, to be honest with everybody. But, and all the other outer space shows we've had over the years, those are just 2 of the most popular. But with all the science fiction technology that we've had, I do believe that we could probably create a planet. And you know what they say about science fiction. Everything that we see in science fiction is already a factual thing in the government, hidden behind black ops. I mean, it's kind of strange, but everyone's like, oh, it's just a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, when people say that the government has technology 20 to 50 years ahead of what we're doing right now with the public. Not crazy at all. Not crazy at all. And we have some evidence. As we talked about on our episode yesterday, the patents for the warp drive, those patents date back to the 1950s. They have patents for the warp drives as old as the 1950s. So just something to keep in mind. And that's all we've got for tonight. So thank you for coming to hang out. Hope to see you all next time. And as always, stay uncanny and always do your own research. We haven't said that in a while, so we're going to say it again tonight, since this was such a highly theoretical episode. Do your own research. Thank you, and have a good night.